Hello, everyone, and welcome in. My name is Bryce Koon. Got Ralph Leary in the background. Appreciate you being patient here on a Monday evening as we talk Georgia Tech, the latest coaching hires, defensive back, what's going on there, and recruiting. Ralph, we're going to go ahead and play the intro song right now. Let's go ahead and just crank it up here at the beginning because this is Swarm Talk on the Crowded Booth.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.
Hello, everyone. Welcome in. My name is Bryce Koon. This is Swarm Talk, the best place that you're going to find, Georgia Tech content on the internet. And I appreciate you. I'm sorry for waiting so long. We get that changed up there at the top. We thank you so much if you're watching live here on YouTube. And yes, I know it was frustrating, and now I know that it is no longer frustrating. But I appreciate you being there along with us. We got Ralph Leary in the background. Give some thumbs up in the chat for him hanging out with us here, as we haven't been live in a hot minute. Ralph, I think the last live show, and Ralph says he just pays me to sit here and keep you all entertained. Ralph, just like I'm looking for that check from LSU, I'm still trying to find, I know you're still trying to find your pay stubs. We appreciate you, Cade. Hope you're doing well. A lot of news, a lot of notes to talk about here over the next 25, 30 minutes or so. We'd love to get some of your questions in. Let us know how you're feeling and what you're talking about as well. But before we get really into this thing, you see it up there at the top. If you're listening on podcast form, you know that our presenting sponsor here at Section 103 is the one, or what is Section 103. They do a fantastic job. Ralph, you can throw that graphic up. Some of the best gear you're going to be able to use. Use code Crowded Booth for 10% off your order. Look, it's that time of the year where, look, you can rock some short sleeves because we're about to get to that weather, especially here in the Southeast, where you can. But it has been very, very cold, and they have a great selection of hoodies and a great selection of, great just all around for the whole family. You can see right there, that ATL hoodie is one of my favorite, honestly, and I've had it for quite a while. I've also rocking the Tech hoodie. My favorite shirt was that one on the right that said, "Welcome to Atlanta." Let's lock it in. Let's talk a little bit of college football. Let's talk about how Georgia Tech fits into this current landscape of college football. And we'll start with some of the conversation. Last time we really talked to you was Tyler Santucci being named the defensive coordinator, what that meant. We're going to have another show probably later this week, detailing how we feel like Santucci, or maybe next week, how Santucci can fix. Like, what are the things that he has to do to fix this defense in order for them to take the next step? That's going to be absolutely crucial for the development and continued development of this team. But tonight we're talking defensive backs coach, because what's going on here? You have everything else in fray. What is happening with this defensive backs coach search? So we're going to sort it out right here. Ralph, we'll throw up that first one here as well. Defensive backs coach updates. Obviously, this has been something that, look, people have seen, people have kind of talked about, people have mentioned in various circles. I think it's been on message boards, it's been in our, Discord chat, which you're more than welcome to join down at the link below. But kind of the cat's out of the bag with this, especially with Junior Day wrapping up and the players being told this. So we'll kind of label it as this. Brumfield is going to be taking, a majority of the coaching, I would say, acumen there. He's going to be helping out with the secondary, specifically with the cornerbacks. We're going to talk about what this means. This is something that he has in his repertoire. It's something that he's familiar with doing. And I wanted to give some thoughts on maybe some of those emotions that are still a little bit raw with this fan base when we get into splitting up cornerbacks and safeties, because that's really where this thing is heading, and that's really kind of where this thing is going. Brumfield is going to work with special teams and defensive backs as a whole. That's something he was, in these meeting rooms with all last season, had some influence in the bowl game, although that was mostly, delegated. And you can take this as a positive or as a negative. In that bowl game, it was really kind of delegated as a positive because some GAs took the role in that room. Some analysts took the roles in that room, and so with Brumfield kind of overseeing cornerbacks for the time being currently, the search has been on, and as it has been for the past couple of weeks, on what Santucci and Brent Key want to do at the safety coach position. That's been the biggest, I would say, kind of fray here as we kind of get closer to, look, you have winter workouts. We're going to start countdowns to the beginning of spring ball here in about 2 months. I'll tell you this, they're going to want to have a safeties coach before the end of the 2 months is up. There's been names thrown around. There's been different things talked about what it could look like. And, there's been some names that have potentially turned this position down. And I think that one of the biggest things, Ralph, did you hear that? Did you hear the bing? I mean, geez, no headphones today. I don't know where they are. Misplaced them. I was 5 minutes late already, but it's fine. So with Brumfield working with the corners, and you're going to bring in a perceived, safeties coach here, this is where you kind of get back into what Georgia Tech did under Jeff Collins. And I know this is something that, the big question is, can splitting up these duties work? What does that look like? Because that's something they did under the Collins regime, and a lot of people disagreed. A lot of people, I think, also kind of pegged the troubles that this defense had at times, too, with that. So, look, I think that when we sit here and we talk about, okay, can Brumfield effectively coach special teams and corners? And then in turn, you have a safeties coach. And at the end of the day, they come together. Can that work? Like, is that something that can work going forward for this team? And I would argue yes, just because it didn't maybe satisfy folks or satisfy the requirements of being a competitive defense and a complete team during the past 3 or 4 years. Brent Key went away from that. They named the one guy, and then they had an assistant. And I'll even tell you this. I said earlier, it's a temporary fix with this, potentially. If Brumfield, might receive that, title of what he wants to do, as special teams guy and working with the corners, you're going to have a DBs coach that's going to hold the title, but different people are going to offer input. So yes, this can work. We've seen this happen, in multiple different other places. Typically, you have a guy that holds the title as defensive backs coach. You have other people that may split up into doing other things. But to have a guy like Brumfield on the staff, who is a really, really good recruiter, especially down here in the state of Louisiana where I'm at, he's already offered a couple of kids that I think would be, just dynamite type of players. He was signed 3 kids in this class, at the very least out of this state too. With his recruiting acumen, getting back into the city of New Orleans has been really huge for Georgia Tech recruiting. So having Brumfield in that role where he's on the field, he's coaching, but now he's also obviously, out on the road currently recruiting, absolutely love that move to kind of say, hey, you're going to go coach corners. Now you can bring in a guy, and this is hypothetical, that has the safeties experience. Maybe it needs to be elevated from his current role to hold the defensive back coach title. And that's where they're currently at. They're trying to search through that. Now, look, we've talked about this coaching search throughout the entire process. Do not let people fool you. Do not let perceived insiders fool you. This has been something that has been kept close to the vest within a circle of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people at most. That's how Brent Key has done his business. It's how, Georgia Tech operates in general, just different than other programs. They're going to keep it all close to the vest. So that's what I want to point out first here is it's been really hard to gather names and information because of the lack of leaks in this, that's how they conduct the program, and that's where it is. There have been some folks that, interviews that have taken place. There have been offers extended and declined from certain folks. I won't reveal one of the names that most recently declined, but it doesn't take you very long to realize it's a guy that changed jobs last week, and then I'll let you, our educated audience, kind of do their own sleuthing for that move. But he just took a new job, and he was offered. Now there's some conflicting reports. Could that still be an option? I don't know. We'll see. We've seen crazier things happen, but that's kind of where we sit with this. So the defensive backs coach search, what are the updates? Well, like we mentioned, Brumfield's going to be coaching the corners. That was announced to the players, and then through various sources confirmed that Brumfield's going to be coaching the corners for the foreseeable future. That could change. It depends on what you bring in. Do you want a guy who wants full control? Does he believe in having separate rooms? or separate people in those positions. Look, I think all of that depends on that. And Ralph goes, if you wanted to know, it's Kalen DeBoer. Um, no, Kalen DeBoer was an offensive coordinator, by the way, too, Ralph. So that wouldn't even make sense unless you're Bill Belichick. So, you know, we get to the kind of this feeling of where is this search going? Is waiting the correct thing you want to do? Look, I think that, as I jotted down some notes here, we know that this search has been kept so close to the vest, but we also know this is a search that has been very, very thorough. Like there has been no rushing through or jumping through the hoops, even as the college football world swarms around you. I mean, the domino effect of Nick Saban retiring, the ladder of coaches having to move positions and what that means, the transfer portal. All in all, Brent Key has kind of stuck to his guns and what he believes he wants to do. And he's gone through with some due diligence to want to make several different hires. That's what he's chosen to do. Look, we could look back on that in 2 years, 3 years, and say, hey, that was the right decision. Or we could look back and say, maybe he should have been more aggressive in the pursuit of someone else, or there should have been something. One, no one's going to know the full story unless you talk to the close circle that Key keeps. And two, you really can't make that judgment call right now because honestly, we can't grade a hire right now because there's been no proof. You can give insight, you can give, things you think could happen, and that's what I did in that last video talking about Santucci. And Ralph provided some great numbers in that show. If you haven't checked it out already, go back and we'll take another, look at that here in the near future. But you can't really grade it. So the idea is waiting a good thing or a bad thing. People have different preferences, and we talked about that on I guess 2 shows ago, where you could sit and look at the waiting game hurts you in recruiting. The waiting game is going to hurt you in getting a plan in place and having the kids, not just that you're recruiting out of the portal or out of the high school ranks, but also on your own roster that, that transfer portal window is still open. They don't know what their future holds. They don't know who's going to be coaching them. But it also could help in the sense of, like Brent Key, like a lot of people, and even my thought was the hire of Tyler Santucci was both realistic and I think a good hire that could pay dividends for Brent Key and this Georgia Tech team and program in years to come. So all that to say with this defensive back coach hire, yes, there is a sense of urgency to get this thing done so you can get the ball rolling into your spring ball prep and everything you want to do into potentially new scheme install and everything. But you don't want to go so fast into it that you maybe make a mistake. And I think Brent Key's learning and growing as a young head coach in that very nature. This is not something he really did. Look, yeah, he hit a home run in doing this with Buster Faulkner last year. You hope that he's done the same with Tyler Santucci. I do believe that he is making sure that his staff, his on-the-field staff, which I believe it's 10 coaches, Ralph, that you can have on the field with you. It's 11 total, including the head coach. And you can break that up any way you can per NCAA rules. But I believe that it's 10 on the field coaches plus the head coach. He wants to know that those other guys around him are fully bought in and understand what it means to work for him. He's cut from the George O'Leary, the Nick Saban cloth, and you can even go over to Athens to look how they run their program. I think that's what Brent Key wants to get to, is a no-nonsense and what this sport has become, a grueling coaching schedule and cycle. So it's a very demanding job. And so all of these things play into the factor, I think, of waiting and taking a turn and saying, okay, we're going to really do our due diligence. We have to make sure we get the right fit. And I'll also throw this in here too. We talked about the recruiting aspect of it. Talking with some folks around the industry about which position coaches are most involved in that. Your secondary coach or defensive backs coach is typically a guy who is a really, really good recruiter, at times even an elite recruiter. You look around at the college football landscape and what they've been able to accomplish, guys making that transition. You don't have to go very far with a guy who was very experienced in defensive backs and just retired in Nick Saban, what he brought to the table. You look up in Athens, a guy who played defensive back and what he's been able to do and build there. You look also at what a guy that's now in the ACC in that conference that Georgia Tech's going to be playing in on the schedule, and Fran Brown at Syracuse. These are guys that are high-level elite recruiters and understand what it takes. So is that playing part of a role? Like, you have to understand, and we're going to get into this when I talk about the recruiting, part here afterwards, the Junior Day recap. But you have to kind of understand, like, Do all 10 guys love to recruit? And they may not all like that. And that might rub folks the wrong way sometimes. And it might, tick some folks off that people aren't crazy about recruiting. But if you're going to have that, if you're going to, have a good, healthy balance of X's and O's and game planning, and then guys that love to recruit, defensive backs coach, I think, is where they've really got to hit on this. I mean, look, I mentioned earlier, you're going to have Brumfield at the cornerback position, who is a really, really high level recruiter, especially in the state of Louisiana, has done a really, really good job with connecting those guys. You have guys like Tay Harris, Jonte Gilbert that we're going to talk about, those high level players that are potentially Georgia Tech's in the mix for. But in this defensive back room, in this secondary coach, if you can get someone who can recruit the city of Atlanta and the surrounding area, can be an elite recruiter in the state of Georgia, man, that really, really compounds with this idea and message that you want to push as Georgia Tech's program in the future. So, I mentioned earlier the defensive backs coach updates. I think that this is still something they are trying to figure out and do their due diligence, make sure they get the right hire. I will say this. I don't think that every single person who has interviewed has been offered the job. And I think the offers that have gone out are far and few in between, meaning that this is a very selective process that Brent Key's trying to undergo here. All right, so we take a step back and we talk about defensive back coach updates. Obviously, a couple big names on campus this past weekend, Ralph, as we take a look at the junior day recap here. Let's talk about what this is. For folks that maybe join and say, hey, I don't know a lot about recruiting, look, we're going to educate you, and then we're going to talk with you. I mean, we want to build a great community here. Junior Day recap. What does that provide? Well, one, it provides an experience for these kids, the 2025 prospects, to get onto campus and to be able to kind of put a name with a face and be able to start that a really big, contact period of this is a guy who's been, for lack of better words, in my Twitter DMs, a guy that has commented on my film, and now we're kind of putting the pieces of the puzzle together. Georgia Tech had a big one where they really kind of dove into the state and what they wanted to do. They really did a good job, in my opinion, my opinion, of identifying guys that they need to start getting in the running for. Look, you could go down the long list of guys that were on campus this past weekend, but I think it really has to matter when you have guys like Jonte Gilbert. You have guys, obviously, like Tay Harris, who decommitted from Georgia this weekend. And then Antoine Hill Jr., the quarterback, the recent decommit from Colorado. Ralph, I believe he plays for Warner Robins, the quarterback down there. And so, getting these kids on campus is a really good step in the right direction. And so what are the early signs? So that's what Junior Day provides. It provides face-to-face time for these, coaching, these recruiting staffers to get these kids on campus and talk with them about what they kind of want from them and how this process is going to go from here on out. Because once the dead period opens up in February, your recruiting timelines get kind of crazy. Then these kids get into 7-on-7s if they're skill players. Then they get into, several, maybe camps or stuff like that. This is a time where you can get that one-on-one time, not in a massive group, really before their senior season begins, in August or September. So what were the early returns? Well, talking, with some, folks that in and around the program, talking with some kids that were there. Look, if you want to feel good about yourself and where you are in recruiting, and I understand maybe moral victories are not the way you want to go with this, and I respect that and I get that, but it feels like kind of the star is starting to shine a little bit brighter on this Houston County. Love it. I could not remember. I knew it was somewhere there in Middle Georgia. Dr. Bob to the rescue. This whole push of what Georgia Tech wanted to do. So let's go back a year. When you started this kind of process of junior days and recruiting, you were really struggling because you were essentially the home of Jake Fromm. There you go, Ralph. That'll do well with folks. If you go back a year, where we kind of sat with this was there was a pitch, there was an idea of what they wanted Georgia Tech to be, but the tangible results, you like that, Ralph? The tangible results, clip it. The tangible results really weren't there. And you could see the promise that they had under the games that, Key was the interim head coach, those 8 final games of the 2023 or 2022 season. But you kind of rolled into it thinking, okay, we think we have an idea what it is, but the pitch was still the same that it was under the previous regime. come here, ball out in Atlanta, cool place to play, get a high level education, all of these different things. And side note, if you're watching live, if you're listening to the podcast, this doesn't matter to you. If you want to get some questions in, we will take some questions here at the end. Ralph can star those for us. Not on the phone, though. We're not doing that. But we'll talk about that. So that was last year's pitch. The early returns have been kids saying, hey, I took notice of what happened this year. I took notice that this team, looked competitive. I took notice of what happened in clean old-fashioned hate. There's a level of respect, I think, also from around the head coaching community, especially in the state of Georgia, from folks that I've talked with, and just in general of what they're trying to build there. A level of respect. I think a level of respect for Coach Key and what he's trying to do. And I think that matters big time when you have events like this, because one, you can, get kids to get on campus that maybe elsewhere are not, they might be in your top 8, you might be in their top 8, but are you really being considered? Well, now that conversation has to take place. And you don't have to go very far to look at names like Tay Harris, we mentioned, Jonte Gilbert, and Antoine Hill Jr. Those 3 guys right there took notice of what was happening in Atlanta and said, hey, let's go visit. And I'll tell you this, once you get a kid to say, hey, I want to get on campus and let's see, now the gloves are off. Now these guys that love recruiting and they can do their job and are free reign to kind of do what they want, essentially. And so there's no, like, you go get a commitment from that kid or make him leave here really considering it. Several of these kids, I think, went up there saying, yeah, I have a relationship with said coach. I want to go up there and I want to, see what it's all about, or, want to respect that. Georgia Tech needs to get out of that. And I think last season, having that tangible result of saying, hey, we not only kind of, buoyed ourselves, kind of, are treading water. We took a step in the right direction. And next year we want to take another step, but we will need you to get on the boat with us so we can, make that next push. I think that's massive in terms of what you're able to provide this weekend. So I think that's huge in what Georgia Tech wanted to do. It was a really good weekend in terms of that. I think kids left, especially kids like the 3 we've mentioned earlier, and Gilbert, Harris, and Hill, saying, okay, all right, like, it's not a courtesy visit, maybe. And like, a lot of people don't like to hear that. But like, I think I did this last year. It's probably around this time last year when he did it. Like, Buster Faulkner's named the OC, and Dylan Raiola comes down to Atlanta for a visit, before he makes his way over to Athens. It was a stopgap visit. It was a courtesy visit because of his relationship with Buster Faulkner. Anybody that's trying to tell you any different needs to take the gold and white glasses off. Like, that's what that was. You want to get out of those conversations. Yeah, you want to get those, kids to visit. But I think these 3 right here are far more than just a courtesy visit of, let's check the box. We went to the in-state school, and then let's move on to more serious options. There might have been a certain feeling like that when they went into the visit weekend. I truly believe, and from understanding some, folks around it, is that they left saying, okay, like, they're not my favorite right now. And essentially they're not a favorite for me right now, but it's legitimate. Like, there's a legitimate interest that Georgia Tech could be able to carry that battle at the very least up until early signing day, if that said kid, or up until a commitment day for that kid. And people have to understand that for progress in all of this, whether it's winning football games or recruiting, and those 2 things are very much hand in hand, and coaching and all these different things, development's all in that picture. But in terms of where you want to go, the progress is not just going to be linear. Like, it's not just going to be this straight line that goes right across without any bumps. No, you're going to have to overcome some challenges, and you may have to take a step back so you can take 2 steps forwards to reevaluate things. And you have to remember, you essentially still have a rookie head coach. You have a guy that is, hasn't done this at this level for very long, and he's going to have to. The growing pains are still not going to be over. He's still going to take a turn back and say, you know what? I may be misevaluating this in year 1. Let's change this for year 2. And I guarantee you there'll be self-reflection in year 3 where he comes back and says, okay, I did this year 2. Maybe we tried this, or maybe we go back to what we did and tinker with it this way. It doesn't mean he's a bad coach. It doesn't mean that's just how people improve. So this idea that they're going to just need to be able to, we're, only going to get 3 stars, and now we need to get in conversation for 5 stars and be legitimate roles for it, that takes time. But you can see the building blocks along the way if you're willing to, And I think it's situations like what the junior day provided this past weekend. I think it was a very beneficial weekend. I think it was a really, really good one for these kids to see what is being offered to them at Georgia Tech, aside from the pitch that they've heard probably since they were freshmen in high school. And then leave it with this. We talked about the mutual respect factor, or the respect factor that is there between high school coaches and what Brent Key is building. That street cred, you want to call it, that credibility is really starting to strengthen, and that bond with some of the coaches in this state are really starting to pick up, and that's also a very, very big positive sign. So you can get into these high schools, or said offensive coordinator at Perry High School says, "Hey, I got a kid, wide receiver that we really like. Here's his stuff." And then you get to build that relationship super early on with a Chris Winkie or with a Buster Faulkner. Those are pivotal things that you want to see taking shape in your program. And by all accounts, this weekend was a notch on the belt of success that you want to see. Once again, progress is not always linear. You can't really jump from A to Z and skip all the other, 24 letters. You really have to be able to go through this process and go through the bumps and bruises. And I think that's where Georgia Tech's going. I think it's really exciting also for fans to kind of see that, because then if Georgia Tech gets to where they want to be, they can become a consistent 8-9 win team every single year and maybe compete for that 12th spot, that an outlier spot in the playoff. If that's the goal, then you get to look back on moments like this and think, man, that's where the hard work and foundation was laid. It's not lame. It's just the product of what's happening in college football. And Georgia Tech has to be able to kind of overcome that and do what they need to do. So I think it's very, very interesting. Going to be very interesting as well to kind of see what happens. What happens as well. Rishi says, insane vocab word. Did I say something that was crazy? I have no idea. I don't know. Raptor, do we have any questions there? Start. We'll go here. Dr. Bob says, I don't like giving up big time home games for neutral site contests, especially in conference. How much the FSU and Notre Dame games next year mean for exposure being played on neutral sites? Dr. Bob, I'll offer this. I was a part of a neutral site game this past year. LSU went down and played Florida State in Orlando. And, LSU, the previous year, had played Florida State in New Orleans. So it was kind of like a home and home, but in a weird way. I'll say this for Georgia Tech, and I think it's different. Like, certain programs have their brand value essentially built in. I'm not saying they recruit themselves, but they have their brand value built in to where people are going to notice what team that is, who's the head coach, and certain players just by virtue of the logo on their helmet. I'm not saying people don't know who Georgia Tech is when they look at the helmet, but it might take the casual or the average football fan a second to remember, and I think it did. And the fans might not like to hear this, but maybe, Ralph, you can comment on this a little bit. I think that people had to kind of remind themselves, especially SEC fans, oh yeah, Haynes King's at Georgia Tech. Like, oh yeah, I kind of forgot about that. Like, if you don't watch this show or you're not a diehard fan, Georgia Tech's not just really one of those programs from an exposure standpoint that you're checking up on and you're checking in on. Not a shot. It's just, I think, kind of the reality of what this is. So from an exposure, you get that week 0 game in Ireland against Florida State. From an exposure aspect, from a TV ratings aspect, to a chance where if you beat them on a national stage when really there's no one else of note playing, and Ralph, I mean, I know it's a long ways away and our lives will be very different by then, but week 0, like in Ireland, I don't even know if there's any other marquee games in week 0 outside of Tech and Florida State. It's probably just a couple of different games. That being said, the exposure that you can gain and the momentum you can gain and the talking points. Look, at the press conferences, Brent Key's going to say it doesn't matter, and that's the coach speak aspect, but it does matter. You need people to start talking about Georgia Tech more. And so I think that would be massive, absolutely huge if they could do that. The Notre Dame game, next year is huge as well. And NC Dog says you get game day as well. I mean, yeah, like that's massive. That's huge to be able to kind of get those things. So, Dr. Bob, I do think it matters for if you are where Georgia Tech is right now. You would hope then, and I think this was the idea behind the Mayhem and the Mercedes or whatever they called it. Mercedes, well, I don't even know what they called that thing. It was some contract that was signed when Collins first came on board. But I think that something that you want to be able to kind of see in this is we build up enough credibility, we build up enough momentum to now we can go back to the drawing board and say, okay, now we're just going to play our regular 6 home games a year, or however many home games you might have, 6 of them, and we still can get the primetime slots, or we can still get big time TV slots and that kind of stuff. We don't have 4 CW games a year. I mean, like that's got to be the ultimate goal. Georgia Tech's ultimate goal, in a long way short, Dr. Bob, is yes, this is a good thing because I think it helps you get away from the CW channel, and I think that's a good thing if you're Georgia Tech football. Ralph, any more questions we have in here? Let's. How do you predict we use the spring transfer portal? This is a good one. This is a really, really good question. From what I have been able to tell is I'm going to say this real quick. I'm going to get back to your question. Dr. Bob says Bryce just broke a cardinal rule. He mentioned the C word in regard to Georgia Tech football. The current UNCD coordinator name shall not be uttered. Ralph, they don't know. So let's go back to that question real quick. Ralph, I know you had it in there, and I'll go back to it and answer it. I don't know what it was, Ralph, so you'll have to go back to wherever it was. I guess it was a starred question. There we go. CDog18 says, how do you predict the spring transfer portal? It's hard to predict right now. I think that Georgia Tech is going to have to see what they have in spring ball. I mean, obviously, the addition of a defensive lineman would be welcomed. I will predict that there will be I predict that they will be active in this because I think that this spring portal window is going to be more active than it was last year. I think kids are going to get an idea of what their role is post spring ball, and they're going to want to move around. And so I think you could see, and I don't know what the current number on scholarships where Georgia Tech sits. I just know that you have to be at 85 when you get into the month of August. So there might have to be some attrition. There might have to be some additions. It wouldn't surprise me though to see Georgia Tech make an addition or two in that spring portal window. They've added some. We'll take a look at the roster here in the next coming weeks leading up to spring ball, but that's kind of where I sit with this in that. We'll go to Nico here. Just a couple more before we get out of here for the evening. Speaking of neutral site home games, I heard that Key wants grass back at the dot. LL. Any word of this happening? Nico had heard some rumblings about that. Not sure how legitimate that is. I mean, look, I love grass fields in the terms of the nostalgia of football it brings back. I think it also helps with obviously injuries. That's no secret. And so I'd be for it, Nico, but honestly, I'm not a specialist in the science of turf and no turf or anything like that. But, that's something I think could potentially happen. Let's go to the last one here of the night. Larry Rich says, fire whoever is making their schedule every year. Top 5 every year is no coincidence. Larry, it is probably a whole podcast episode that we're going to have to kind of roll through a way too early look here at the schedule. But yeah, it's tough. And, you lose Clemson as your traditional rival. You'll get them next year, but you're going to still have to play. I mean, I think they play, Ralph, every single potential perceived contender in the ACC next year outside of a Clemson. Like, I think they do. And then you add in they're going to be playing Georgia. So it is what it is, man. It is tough. I think it gives you a challenge. And the conversation will have to become like if Georgia Tech can get to a point where they can win those games. And I'll just say right here, right now, let's do this real quick. If we look at this GT 2024 schedule, and I'll end the show with this. I have been very bullish about how I feel about this program, in the kind of just as where they go. If I'm looking at this, and we're going to talk about this because I do believe the schedule comes out here on the 24th, which would be in a couple days, I believe Wednesday. I mean, I think that honestly, there's probably 2 games that I could confidently say you should win. Ralph, do you have the schedule pulled up? Like, I think so. I think the 2 wins that I can confidently say here, and Ralph's been looking at pants. That's good ads right there, Ralph. Yeah, I mean, that's the schedule right there. I mean, Florida State, I can't confidently say right now you're going to win it. Georgia State, you should win it. And I'll tell you one thing, folks. Me saying Georgia State is a trap game is not a lie. You may not like it, but traveling all the way, Ralph, am I wrong here? Traveling all the way to Ireland, playing a physical, I don't care how good you think Florida State's going to be. It's going to be a physical football game. then coming all the way back in the next week playing Georgia State, a team that one is their starting quarterback is going to be one of your former cornerbacks. They're going to have a cornerback that wants nothing more than to show up, what he felt like he should have earned in on Bobby Dodd and on the flats, and a team that wants to beat you so bad. That's the definition of a trap game. It's not hating on Georgia Tech. Vegas odds would tell you that. College football observers would tell you those things. But you should beat Georgia State, and you should beat VMI, the Keydets. Outside of that, like on January what is today? I don't even know what today is. January 22nd, like a team that you should confidently pencil in a W. Brent Key wouldn't, first off. He doesn't do that. I'm not either. Like I think two of those games I can confidently tell you, yeah, that's what you should win. Now that you should go win. Now teams that you could beat, whole different conversation. Some people are going to hear one thing, some people are going to hear the other, but that's okay. Hey, we appreciate you being a part of the show. We appreciate you tuning in live and just at a moment's notice. Maybe we have to go live. We appreciate you being a part of it. Make sure you like this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Keep getting those numbers up. We'll have a schedule kind of release show. We'll have some more content rolling out here, both in the pre-recorded as well, and cannot wait for you to be a part of what we have going on here at the Crowded Booth. If you like college football and you just want to join in on the conversation, myself, Ralph Leary, and Will Mannis do some great shows, and we're going to be penciling in possibly a live weekly show even throughout the offseason, at least one night a week. That'll be a ton of fun talking college football and the never-ending offseason that we sit in. He is Ralph Leary in the background. We appreciate you listening, whether it's on Spotify, Apple Podcast. My name is Bryce Koon, and we will catch you next time. This is Swarm Talk, #1 Georgia Tech show on the internet, brought to you by the Crowded Booth.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.